The story starts evolved with the lovely city of Eta in Norway. Brothers Loritz and Magna arrive at their new domestic pushed with the aid of using their mom turd on their manor. A person with one eye known as Voton is visible struck on the street on his wheelchair, so he's helped with the aid of using Magna throughout the street. For this type act of Magna he's touched at the brow with the aid of using a typical vintage female known as W. And thunderbolts may be visible with inside the eyes of Magna as Magna receives returned with inside the vehicle. He appears to be exceptional. He breaks the doorknob even as ascending the window of the automobile. He then remarks that it's going to rain, and similar to that, rain falls from the sky. Once you have settled, our brothers arrive at college, wherein Magna facilitates a brand new buddy is bought, solving her motorcycle with the aid of using his first-rate new strength. Additionally, now Magna is asking really without his glasses as his eyesight got higher in a single day. A lovely middle elderly girl named Ran is there most important, who calls the mom of Magna for the first determine instructor assembly. In the course of the assembly, Magna once more feels something unnatural and asks to shut the window. However, the most important and his mom would not take note of him a good deal. Magna is constantly seeing symptoms of Norse mythology on various things. Just like the hammer of his mom, he would not recognize what's occurring with him, but there. Following morning, I sold invitations Magna as much as the pinnacle of the mountain for a hike. Right here in the course of the hike, she well-known shows she's without a doubt a lesbian and in love with Saksa, a female. From their elegance, after a while they attain an area wherein they see a warning board caution them now no longer to head in advance. Similarly, however, his boat desires to pass in advance. She says that this warning board turned into now no longer gift closing week, so it should be secure for them to head in advance earlier than Magna should make up his thoughts. He obtained a message from his brother Loritz telling him that their mom's fitness turned into important. This activates Magna to run returned domestic, leaving I sold on my own at the mountain. So I sold maintains her hick and sees that the glacier is melting. Greater quick there anticipated, and she sees a tunnel uncovered because of the melting of that glacier. She takes a few pictures of their environment, and as she is inquisitive about environmental problems because of the dangerous consequences of the industries, she additionally takes a few water samples from the then Isolde enters the tunnel in the front of her, wherein she sees a hidden garage vicinity owned with the aid of using Judel Industries. Alternatively, Magna has reached domestic and realizes that his mom is pretty K. His brother Laura joked with him with the aid of using sending that message approximately their mom's fitness. After that, Magna comes out of his residence and witnesses a paraglider. While he specializes in the man or woman, he realizes that it is a bot and he or she has misplaced her manipulate and is now going to strike the strength traces. She calls a soul to be cautious, however she moves immediately into their strength traces and a massive spark comes off while Magna is going closer to look his old. She is already lifeless. That nighttime Magnet could be very unhappy. Approximately the dying of a soul. He alternatives up a hammer with inside the pouring rain and throws it into the sky and rages. Strength surges and a blackout consumes the complete metropolis. Magnet is amazed that the hammer has long passed up to now that he cannot even see it. The following day we see the husband of the faculty essential getting out of his automobile on the mountain. His call is Vito and he's the CEO of Judel Industries. He takes to the air his garments and goals a few reindeer wandering in a meadow. All at once his eyes flip yellow as though he's a supernatural being. He then assaults one of the reindeer and kills it together along with his mere palms. He additionally has extremely good electricity and seems like he has skill too, not likely of Magna. He then rips off the chest of the reindeer and takes its coronary heart out. After that, Vito is going to a cliff of a mountain searching on the sky and lake in the front of him. It looks as if a few form of ritual as Vito is out of his clothes and he eats their coronary heart of their reindeer there with all of the blood smashing his face and palms. Day after today, Durit reaches the Judel Industries on the time while Vita has come that Durit has were given the task of accountant at Judel Industries. The usage of his beyond connection with Vita they have got acknowledged every different when you consider that their teenage lifestyles. Vita tells Did that a person has vandalized his automobile with the aid of using smashing a hammer with inside the front window, so he asks Did to touch touch the coverage corporation to address the matter. While Tut sees the image of the smashed window, she acknowledges the hammer as her very own. Without a doubt it changed into Magna, who threw the hammer ultimate night time, and it fell a long way off the Auto Avita. After returning domestic, Tut rebukes Magna for vandalizing the Auto Avita. However, Magna is not able to recognize how a hammer can cross up to now, as the auto changed into parked in the front of the residence of the Jew-alone circle of relatives, that is a long way far from the residence of Magna. He then calculates the space, the usage of Google Maps, which comes as much as B1 and a 1/2 of km, so Magna changed into capable of throw a hammer to a distance of 1.5 kilometer. At night time he buys every other hammer and throws it once more. He then measures the space, the usage of his steps, and it comes out to be approximately 500 m. It's a great deal extra than the global document, so Magnet is now once more stressed approximately his electricity. Alternatively, Vita stocks his concerns together along with his spouse approximately how a person can hit his automobile. He says that he's experiencing one of these factor for the primary time in his previous 1,000 years of existence. His spouse Ran asks him if he these days harm all and sundry. To this, Vita recognizes that he killed a girl these days who turned into taking his pattern of water from the springs close to the mountain of Judal Industries. His cause for doing so lies round hiding the bunker underground. She exposed the following morning. A police officer involves college and informs the scholars approximately the dying of as vintage consistent with her. His vintage could have been struck with the aid of using lightning, as their climate turned into horrific that night. However, Magna is aware of that it turned into now no longer the climate that induced his so's dying. The psychologist of the college asks college students if they could come to him in the event that they experience uncomfortable after the dying of their fellow. He specifically factors at Magna for coming to him, as he had witnessed the dying himself, but Magna is inquisitive about understanding greater approximately his soul's dying from the police officer. He asks a few questions from the police to get deeper into the problem. However, in the long run he realizes that the police need to bury the case, announcing it turned into an accident. As he is looking questions from the police officer, Ran is secretly being attentive to their communique, and she or he is worried approximately the hobby of Magna with inside the case due to the fact it could reveal her husband. For now, Magna is satisfied that whether or not the police have joined arms with Judal Industries, or they may be now no longer taking the problem of the homicide too severely, so he has no hope from the police branch. The next day, Jew-alone circle of relatives contributors Saksa and Def take each the brothers Magnet and Loritz with them of their vehicle. Saksa and Def are brother and sister and have a look at with Magna and Lorit. Their father Vita has assigned them to get near with Magna and recognize greater approximately him, so nowadays they may be taking the each brothers with them to their domestic that will experience a while collectively at the manor. A hen crashes with the windshield of their vehicle, and San Fjord comes out of the automobile to test at the hen. They may be pretending as though they may be concerned approximately the hen. However, while they may be by myself and Magna and Lorit aren't seeing the each siblings, Saksa eats the hen as though she enjoys consuming the residing matters. The Judal-alone circle of relatives is sincerely something. Later that day, Magna statistics his running velocity in an extended hallway, and it once more comes out to be more than the sector report. Now Magna is greatly satisfied that he's a unique one and possesses positive powers. Being glad via way of means of this, he comes out of the constructing and attempts to see Ross the street without seeing proper and left abruptly. A heavy car comes and hits him badly. Verse sees all this and he is glad that now Magna is useless and he's secure, as Magna's interest approximately a soul's case might have been a problem for him. However, miraculously, whilst the docs tested the X-ray reviews of Magna, they're amazed to hear that there aren't any fractures with inside the frame of Magna. The docs are very burdened approximately how Magna can live to tell the tale. This kind of massive coincidence with this kind of massive car, as there's not anything for them to achieve this. They discharge him quickly. All of the Magnus garments are torn because of the coincidence. However, there isn't an unmarried bruise on his frame after a accomplishing his domestic. Magnus sees that the coat of assault which he turned into carrying on the time of his dying has exclusive smells, the feel of odor of. Magna has been improved very a good deal. He can feel that from inner it is wafted odor, whilst from out of doors it is a few odor of the blood of a person else. So he receives very intrigued approximately this aspect. The next day in elegance Sarksu invitations Magna and his brother Litz to her residence, once more announcing it is going to be a laugh and that the complete elegance can be. The Magna is of the same opinion, even though he is a touch uncertain. That nighttime Magna and Loritz arrive on the jewel-owned circle of relatives is massive. Fancy residence there, welcome dinner, and spot Ran and V2 already there. However, nobody else from their elegance has proven up, which makes Magnus suspicious. Lorit alternatively would not thoughts he is excited to be in this kind of wealthy and steeply priced area. The jewel-owned circle of relatives has organized a massive dinner with many exclusive dishes. Magna and Lorit experience the meals and also are presented a few uncommon highly priced wine. They drink loads and chat with Sarksa and Fjord, whilst Ran and Vita pay attention quietly. That nighttime Vita notices that Magna would not appear affected in any respect even after drinking a lot wine. Curious, Vita steps ahead and gives Magna an historical drink called mead. He explains that their ancestors used to drink it and that it is each pleasant and unique. Intrigued, Magna is of the same opinion to strive it as quickly as Magnet beverages the beef. Something adjustments in him. He feels a rush of electricity and exhilaration for the primary time that night-time. We could freak a leaping and even dancing across the corridor. The beef feels in contrast to something he has ever had earlier than, and in his exhilaration he accidentally well-known shows a small glimpse of his incredible electricity. The jewel-owned circle of relatives watches intently, their expression moving among leisure and interest. Noticing Magna's show, Ran steps ahead with a difficult smirk. She shows they check his electricity in a handshake sport. Magna eagerly accepts the mission for the duration of the handshake sport. Magna places all his electricity into defeating Rand. However, Ran, who's a good deal more potent than he predicted, would not let him advantage the higher hand. The two of them push towards every different with the whole thing they have got. Magnus struggles as he's nonetheless new to his powers, even as the jewel-owned circle of relatives has lived with their strengths for heaps of years. Magna's arms start to shake with the attempt. Subsequently annoyed, he asks Ran who she certainly is. Ran would not solution proper away, rather she counters who Magna is earlier than Magna can reply. Something odd occurs for a quick second. Ran's face modifications absolutely her capabilities rework into something antique, fierce and terrifying, a face that seems like it belongs to a risky villain from historic memories. Magna stares in surprise and he's not able to talk simply as quick because the alternate occurs. Ran's face shifts again to her regular self, calm and composed, and not using a signal of the sinister expression. He simply noticed Magnet is uncertain if what he witnessed became actual or his creativeness. Magna's uns grows as he realizes there may be a good deal greater to the jewel-owned circle of relatives than he ideated. Later Magna catches a glimpse of himself with inside the replicate. For a cut-up second he is bowled over. His face seems exceptional hair is sprouted throughout, making him appearance wild and beast-like. However, whilst he blinks the photo is long gone. He shakes his head uncertain if it smiles actual or now no longer. Again domestic, Magna feels restless. He opens his PC and starts evolved studying historic myths and Norse mythology, hoping to make experience of the whole thing. As he digs deeper, the portions begin to fall into vicinity. He discovers that the glass is the jewel-owned circle of relatives used to serve him. Match the designs utilized by giants in historic instances. This consciousness makes him suppose again to their incredible electricity and odd behavior. Magna starts evolved to suspect the jewel-owned circle of relatives isn't always everyday. They may be giants from the antique memories. As he keeps analyzing, Magnus stumbles upon scriptures describing the god Thor the Greater. He reads the greater. Satisfied, he turns into that he's Thor reborn. He begins evolved to sense that he wishes a hammer as his weapon, much like Thor had. His mind races. He recollects the jewel-owned circle of relatives is K9, which he now acknowledges from the one's identical historic scriptures. His suspicions develop even more potent whilst he thinks approximately his brother Lorit. Magna wonders if Lorit might be Loki the trickster from the antique myths. Magnus sits in his room misplaced in idea whilst a reminiscence unexpectedly hits him. He recollects the instant whilst the whole thing started the day they moved to this new metropolis. He recollects the vintage female they met on the time who touched his brow and murmured something atypical. That second had felt uncommon, however he didn't suppose plenty of it returned then. Now it feels like the important thing to the whole thing. Decided to locate solutions. Magna visits the vintage female once more operating on the neighborhood general store. He confronts her asking what she did to him that day. The vintage female seems at him evenly and smiles, pronouncing that she did not anything. She says softly that what Magna experienced became constantly in him she most effective way did now. Whilst Magnet is not able to manipulate the energy, the vintage female shows him to locate the opposite gods. She tells him that he's going to meet a person at the bridge. Feeling crushed with the aid of using the whole thing, Magna leaves and comes to a decision to clean his head with the aid of using, going for a longer term through the town and the close by forest. In the meantime, on the Jew-alone circle of relatives, as domestic tensions are rising, they now understand that Magna is the god Thor reborn and he has come to damage the giants. Panic and anger unfold through the own circle of relatives. They accumulate their historical guns to kill Magna earlier than he will become too effective. They trust most effective their vintage enchanted guns can prevent a god. Va desires to kill Magna proper away, however Anne says that the time has modified and that they ought to defeat Magna. The use of the machine, she shows that she wishes a while and then she can be able to herself get rid of Magna with the aid of using her personal techniques. FJ is of the same opinion with Ran, however Saksa is of the same opinion with Vita, satisfied that conventional techniques are the most effective manner to defeat Thor. The own circle of relatives splits into camps, every with an extraordinary plan to deal with Magna. Tomorrow at college, Saksa and Fjord confront Magna. They reveal that they understand who he is and remind him in their centuries lengthy lifestyles on Earth. They declare that no toddler could damage them. Now Magna listens silently, after which walks away, selecting now no longer to reply. For the time later, Magna joins his classmate GR for a trekking journey. At some stage in the hike he starts to observe his outstanding vision. He can see people drawing close from some distance away and correctly describe them lengthy earlier than they may be seen to others. GY is amazed with the aid of using his capacity, however dismisses it as a fortunate wager as they preserve. Magna realizes his sight is sharper than ever. He observed is a fowl flying excessive overhead some distance past what anybody else can see actually, but he can see into its eyes as if it have been proper in the front of him. Even as at the mountain, Magna notices something uncommon with inside the distance. Upon nearer inspection he reveals a lifeless reindeer. Mendacity at the mountain. As he comes nearer and examines its frame, he's struck with the aid of using a acquainted scent, the heady fragrance of blood, the identical one he had observed on his soul's overcoat in advance. Additionally, the reindeer's coronary heart is lacking, as though it were intentionally eliminated. Magna returns to the campsite in which his classmates are accumulated round. To his marvel, Vito is there, as nicely mixing into the institution effects there. He asks Magna to help him put together meat for the night meal, so Magna starts reducing the beef into small specific portions with unexpected ability. Veta watches him intently and comments on how professional he is, nearly as though he has been doing it for years. Veta then guidelines that he is aware of extra approximately him than he would possibly recognize. He warns Magna that he and his own circle of relatives will now no longer be defeated through Magna, but Magna leaves without announcing something. Later, Vita devises a plan to kill Magna at the same time as they're nonetheless at the mountain. Understanding it might be smooth to make it seem like a twist of fate to carry out the plan, he sends his canine to seek and kill Magna. In the meantime, Magna is looking GRY depart with FJ for a paragliding journey. He follows them, however by the point he reaches the takeoff factor they have got already left the mountain. In reality, Magna loves GRY and he doesn't need to permit GRY cross into the arms of Fjord. As he turns returned, he senses that A person is following him. He appears round, however sees not anything at the start. Abruptly the canine lunges at him, attacking ferociously. The beast attempts to overpower Magna, however he grabs a stick and forces it into the canine's mouth, the usage of all his energy to protect himself. The combat is excessive, however Magna's power proves extra. He kills the canine, tearing it aside through keeping its mouth and ripping it open. In a while, shaken and indignant, Magna heads to flying GR and F whilst he subsequently tracks them down. He's met with a heartbreaking sight there at Judd's residence. Mendacity collectively bear at the mattress. Magna had emotions for GRY, however seeing her with Fjord left him harm and silent. He makes a decision to depart them by myself and walks away. Returned at the mountain, Vita reveals his canine's frame. Mendacity dead at the rocks. This sight fills him with rage. Now he's decided to take revenge on Magna, vowing to make him pay for what he has carried out with. Inside the subsequent scene, Magna and Vita face every difference in an abandon in constructing the surroundings is demanding as they trade some phrases. Earlier than the combat starts, Magna throws punches with all his energy, however V is a long way too skilled and agile. He dodges each attack. Effects smirking at Magna's tries. Magna grows an increasing number of pissed off as not anything he does appears to paintings towards Vita's overwhelming energy. In the meantime, Fjord is given a sinister challenge through Vita. He's ordered to kill GRA, even though FJ additionally has emotions for her. VA reminds Fjord that loving humans isn't always part of the giant's nature. To show his loyalty to the giants, Fjord need to get rid of her. Fjord reluctantly is of the same opinion, however his hesitation indicates an internal battle. Returned on the combat, Magna is suffering. Vita overpowers him at each flip, leaving him at the protective simply, while evidently Magna has no risk. The sky starts evolved to darken, clouds acquire above the constructing, and Magna feels a surge of anger developing inside him. V scoffs him similarly and famous that he killed Wofford at the mountain. He says that he killed her while she was investigating the water samples from the JW family's mountains. Listening to this, Magna is fed on through rage and reminiscences of Wofford flood his thoughts. At that second, lightning moves them with a deafening crack. The pressure of the strike sends each Magna and Vita flying aside, every crashing to the floor. The unexpected burst of strength leaves them each subconscious as Magna and Vita lie subconscious after the lightning strike. The vintage female from the superstore watches from a distance. She touches her pendant and kisses it as though sending a silent message. On the identical time, a tuk takes flight from the area. The subsequent season starts evolved with rescue employees arriving on the constructing. They locate Magna unresponsive and strive to revive him. The use of a defibrillator, but as quickly as they observe the electrical tool to his chest, the rescuer receives an effective surprise thrown return through the lightning, saved inside Magna. Moments later, Magna wakes up disoriented, however alive. He turns to locate Vita, who additionally starts evolved to stir. Vita's yellow eyes glow fiercely as he wakes up, and without hesitation he grabs Magna through the throat with one hand. For a second it appears Vita will kill him, however he releases Magna as he does not have the one's vintage guns with him on the time. After that, Magna returns domestic and comes to a decision to divulge heart's contents to his brother Loritz. He famous his perception that he's Thor and indicates that Loritz is probably low. Loritz to start with dismisses the concept, giggling at Magna's declare to show his factor. Magna selections up an iron baseball bat and bends it, results easily in the front of him. Loritz, stunned and speechless, starts evolved to rethink Ale, even though he does not absolutely take delivery of the fact. But later that day, Magna meets a female named Iman on a bridge. She appears mysterious and acquainted, as though related to the prophecy cited through the vintage female in advance. So Magna takes Iman with him to his residence. Magna asks Iman approximately her strengths, suspecting she has talents comparable to his personal, but Iman insists that she has no awesome powers aside from her allure and the convenience with which she can persuade humans. Magna indicates that her power have to be something deeper and he or she must attention on locating the one's strengths. Later that day at a celebration assembly, Iman starts evolved to suspect that Magna is probably proper. She makes a decision to check her abilities creating a touch with a close-by boy. She flippantly instructs him to deliver a tumbler of wine for her on his knees. To Magna's marvel, the boy follows her command without hesitation, as Ale, even though forced via way of means of a few invisible pressure, Imar, knowing what she has simply achieved, tells Magna that she has located her power. Now she explains that her energy appears to lie in her potential to steer others, bending to fit her very own tomorrow. Magna takes him directly to a close-by workshop with a plan to have a hammer crafted. He explains to the workshop proprietor that he desires a hammer solid from steel, displaying him a hard caricature of the layout. First of all, the person refuses, mentioning that he does not create guns, but Iman steps in, locking eyes with the person and speaking flippantly below her have an effect on the person. Speedy modifications his thoughts and has the same opinion to make the hammer for Magna. He guarantees that it is going to be prepared via way of means of the following day. In the meantime, Loritz will become skeptical. Approximately the complete concept of his life. He questions how he's so distinctive from his brother Magna in genetics. He additionally expresses those issues to his mother. The scene shifts to Turd, who visits Vito at Jarl Industries, wherein she additionally work. But the communique of Turd with V quickly turns non-public. Turd hesitatingly. Famous and extended buried mystery to Vita. Loritz is certainly his son. She explains that years in the past, after they have been teens, they established at a celebration now no longer lengthy after Vita disappeared from her existence. Unaware that Turd became pregnant, left to address the scenario on her very own, Turd determined to elevate Lorit as her son, retaining his proper parentage. A mystery. Turit explains that Lorit has usually felt distinctive, and recently he has been expressing that he does not experience like his brother Magna. This distinction has stricken Lorit deeply, and Turit believes Vita merits to recognize their reality. Vita, bowled over via way of means of the revelation, stays silent. Vita, rather than feeling remorse or guilt, will become happy via way of means of Turret's revelation. He realizes that is a sudden gain to having a person from his very own bloodline inside the camp of his enemy. He begins evolved devising approaches to govern Loritz, hoping to show him in opposition to Magna. Later that night time, while Magna returns domestic, he's startled to peer Vita leaving their residence. Vita stocks a heat hug with Lorit earlier than departing. The bond among Vita and Loritz seems to have already all started forming, and it unsettles Magna. Lorit additionally appears without a doubt glad to be receiving interest and affection from Vita. The subsequent day, Magna gets his hammer from the workshop. Excited to check it, he heads to a secluded region to exercise. He knows that Thor's hammer ought to go back to Thor while thrown away. However, matters do not move as deliberate. While Magna throws the hammer, it soars a long way away and doesn't come lower back. He attempts numerous instances to name it lower back, however fails, knowing something is off. Magna and Iman visit, retrieve the hammer. Magna starts evolved to suspect that the hammer is both now no longer completely equipped or hasn't been activated via way of means of his powers. Looking for solutions, he comes to a decision to seek advice from the antique girl who gave him the prophecy, approximately being Thor. While Magna meets the antique girl, she appears frightened and alert. Unknown to Magna, a person is secretly looking them from a distance. The antique girl notices the undercover agent and will become involved. She warns Magna that it is now no longer secure for them to fulfill like this, and urges him to depart right away. Earlier than parting, she offers him a delegated vicinity in time for their subsequent assembly, promising to give an explanation for the whole thing. Approximately the hammer. There the scene shifts to the dual-owned circle of relatives domestic, wherein Lorit is now sitting together along with his father via looking to solidify their bond and convey Let's completely into his group. Gives him a cup of meat, once more a drink laced with historic energy. Via then exhibits the coronary heart of a reindeer that's an historic and sacred presenting. He explains to Loritz that ingesting their coronary heart of reindeer will wake up his dormant massive blood and grant him the power and immortality like that of will own circle of relatives ale. Even though hesitant before everything Lorit offers in and he eats the coronary heart unexpectedly, he feels an instantaneous surge of energy coursing via his frame to check his transformation via holds. Let's quit a roaring hearth place before everything. Loritz feels the pointy ache of the flames, however his wounds speedy heal earlier than his eyes, a clean signal that his frame has become invincible just like the different giants. Thea, thrilled with the final results, informs Lorit that he now possesses everlasting existence and could now no longer age or die like normal people. Lorit starts evolved to embody his NIM observed identification. The questions on who he absolutely is now have solutions, and he feels content material together along with his new self. While he returns domestic, he stocks the whole thing approximately the Jew alone circle of relatives with Magna. He tells Magna approximately Vidar's plans, his transformation, and the way the Jew alone circle of relatives is concentrated on the antique girl who had given Magna the prophecy. Listening to this, Magna speedy knows that the antique girl is in chance due to her connection to him. In the meantime, the scene shifts to Ran, who has tracked down the antique girl. The antique girl, sensing chance, kisses her pendant and transforms right into a chicken to get away, but Ran, an professional archer, fires an arrow with precision. The arrow moves the chicken mid-flight and it falls to the floor, reworking lower back into the antique girl. Critically injured, the antique girl musters her final electricity and crawls to a close-by residence. She reveals an antique guy in a wheelchair and fingers him. Her pendant together along with her remaining phrases, she urges him to assist Magna satisfy his destiny and virtually come to be Thor. Moments later, her frame will become ashes, may not anything, however a pile of sand. Magna arrives simply because the antique female breathes her remaining. He kneels through her ashes, devastated that he couldn't store her. The scene shifts to the antique guy who has obtained the pendant from the demise Lady Ale, even though limited to a wheelchair and not able to stroll as soon as he holds the pendant. A metamorphosis takes place. The pendant's mystical electricity guides through him and the man rises to his toes and it smiles, found out that this pendant has granted him sizable supernatural electricity, making him their king of the gods Odin. In the meantime, Magna returns domestic, wherein Lorit is keen to display his newfound competencies. Lorit grabs a screwdriver, stabs it into his very own hand and pulls it out to Magnus. Surprised, the wound heals right away, leaving no hint of damage. Lorit seems proud of his transformation, however Magna is deeply concerned regardless of his unease. Magna is aware of that the historic texts have foretold this. Lorit is Loki, the god of mischief, destined to play a signalific function with inside the Destiny Ale. Even though Magna dislikes what his brother has come to be, he can't deny the reality of the prophecy and the burden in their destinies. The next day, Magna visits the antique guy who now wields the electricity of the mystical pendant. The antique guy tells Magna that they should discover the alternative gods scattered amongst humanity. They want to unite and shape a crew sturdy sufficient to face in opposition to the giants who manage over the metropolis and pose an approaching risk to humanity. The warfare in advance isn't pretty much survival, however, approximately making sure the protection of Guy kind from the destruction of the giants. Because the antique guy speaks, Lorit enters the room. The antique guy straight away acknowledges his presence and grows careful. He is aware of all too properly the character of Loki, the god of mischief. Betrayal and deception are part of Loki's essence, making him a risky legal responsibility to their motive. Without hesitation, the antique guy tells Lorit he should go away as he can't be relied on and isn't virtually certainly considered one among them. It truly is why Lorit reluctantly steps out, leaving Magna and the antique guy to speak about their plan for the Destiny. After being brushed off from the room, Lorit wanders into the health facility. He notices a nurse cautiously arranging blood samples of numerous sufferers, which include that of their antique guy who holds the pendant's electricity. Lorit tactics the nurse with a fabricated tale, sending her off on an errand. With the place now clean, he unexpectedly takes the antique guy's blood pattern and without hesitation Lorit injects their Antique guy's blood into his very own veins, hoping to take in its mystical houses. Because the blood machine, an unsettling transformation, starts evolved, he feels a surge of electricity lets. Turns into something absolutely new, a hybrid of god giant and mortal. Later we see a public protest take area with crowds gathering to denounce Judal Industries for poisoning the area's ingesting water. The scene is chaotic, with chants and banners filling the vicinity. Amid the uproar, Lorit sneaks into Vita's vehicle, making his allegiance clean through flipping off Magna and the relaxation of the god's crew. His frustration with being excluded from their plans drives him to aspect with the giants. Upon arriving on the Jewel property, Vita welcomes Loritz with a smile. Sensing, he leads Loritz to a hidden chamber wherein historic sculptures, ornate monuments and weaponry from a long time past are displayed. The room offers an experience of timelessness heavy with records. Vita explains that those relics belong to the giants who've ruled the earth for heaps of years. Lorit questions how the giants controlled to stay for thus long without displaying their age. In reaction, Va reveals his true face that's wrinkled and weathered, bearing the burden of centuries. So he too receives Antique. However, he has hidden his antique wiped out face at the back of a younger mask. As Lorit marvels on the power of the giants, V's tone shifts. He ominously warns that whilst its hybrid nature offers him power, it additionally makes him a legal responsibility. Vita cannot tolerate the presence of a one-half of massive one-half of God in his ranks. Fearing betrayal, it really is why he is going to kill Loritz. Simply as Vita increases an historic blade to strike, Magna bursts in to defend his brother. The conflict among Magna and Vita shakes the room. Vita's power as a massive is overwhelming, and for a second it looks as if Magna would possibly lose. However, Magna's willpower to stop Loritz fuels him, and he moves returned with all his would, possibly with inside the midst in their fierce war. Magna notices the antique wall placing on their wall. That's a weapon of the giants. Knowing its capability, he pushes Vita closer to it. In the end, Magna forces Vita backward, inflicting him to stumble onto the wall. The historic weapon pierces Vita's chest and Vita shall out a deafening roar as his frame starts evolved to crumble. Because the ashes of Vita's settle, Magna is aware of that is simply the start. The Judal own circle of relatives will now no longer take Vita's demise gently. The following day, Lorit studies extreme ache in his stomach, which starts swelling unnaturally involved. Approximately this, he visits the medical institution wherein the docs carry out an ultrasound. To their shock, they find out a giant tapeworm-like creature in him. In contrast to something they have ever encountered, they determine to carry out emergency surgical procedure to do away with the creature. After the hit operation, the docs are each relieved and curious. One in all them tactics lets, requesting permission to ship the creature to a lab for similarly look at, as its length and nature defy all scientific norms. But the physician additionally informs Loritz that the Trojan horse remains alive, which could be very unnatural. Loritz realizes that it isn't always an regular worm, however the offspring of Loki. That's a serpent-like entity tied to a parent myths. In the meantime, Magna attends V's funeral, in which Murs solemnly pay their respects. Because the rite progresses, the climate all at once shifts. Darkish clouds accumulate and an unexpected bolt of lightning moves the constructing, shattering a massive window. Spotting the unnatural phenomenon as a signal, Magna leaves their funeral and springs out with inside the nature status. At the threshold of a towering mountain cliff, Magna yells with all his electricity. He's crushed with agony and desires solutions from the forces that selected him. He cries out for steering for his hammer to paintings and for a clean direction on this more and more chaotic world. Additionally, the guilt weighs closely on him as he wrestles with the fact of getting killed. Vita, who's the daddy of his brother Lorit, Magna questions whether or not he's worth of this course, unsure if he can keep bearing the load of his destiny, after which he starts yelling that he does not need these types of powers and he simply desires to be a regular man or woman. In the meantime, tensions rise among Fjord and GRY, who've been dwelling collectively, but however now they've a heated argument. GY expresses her desire to go away ETA and begin clean some other place, but FJ FJ refuses to desert his home. With V long past, he feels a deep experience of duty to take over his father's function and uphold the dual-own circle of relatives' legacy, so he distances himself from GR. This marks Fjord's transformation into the principal villain of the tale. After that, Fjord is going toward the wilderness in which an historical weapon is hidden. Fjord picks up the weapon as he desires it to take revenge for his father. Now then, he is going to the identical cliff in which Vita used to go for sacrifices there. Fjord now vows to avenge Vita irrespective of the value. He now absolutely embraces his function because the chief of the Jude-alone circle of relatives and the heir in their historical mission. From the following day we see that Magna is now powerless and suffering to evolve to his antique everyday lifestyles. He desires glasses to look clearly once more, and his clumsiness frequently ends in injuries like falling from stairs, emphasizing his transformation lower back into unregular man or woman. That day Magna's mom Turd is knowledgeable that she's been disregarded from her task at Judel Industries. That is because of F's takeover of the organization after his father's demise, leaving him on top of things. Of all major selections, Turit is devastated through the lack of her activity and is unsure approximately what the destiny holds for her. Magna, enraged through the scenario and his mother's misery, confronts Fjord, but stripped of his powers, Magna feels helpless and inclined. FJ without difficulty overpowers him and throws his glasses away, mocking his fragility. Fjord then says that his father have been negative at making selections which in the long run caused this downfall, as now he's the in charge. So he's going to determine who will live on the Industries lower back at domestic. Magna notices something ordinary in a tumbler container. Upon nearer inspection he realizes that it is the identical tapeworm that became as soon as eliminated from Litz's stomach, but this tapeworm appears to have grown a chunk. It now seems large and greater, risky, nearly as though it has developed or mutated in a few manner. Later Magna procedures the vintage guy with the pendant in his ownership, loss of life, to regain his powers. Magna pleads for Odin's assist. Odin listens cautiously, after which tells him that Magna desires to make the hammer of Thor with inside the eternal hearthplace to get his powers lower back to repair the hammer of Thor and liberate his complete capability. They should first discover the eternal hearthplace, an historic mystical flame able to forging divine guns. However, this task cannot be finished without the resource of a dwarf, as dwarfs have been the grasp weaponsmiths with inside the historic instances who cast equipment of gods. Magnus units up decided to reclaim his energy through forging the hammer of Thor. He gathers his crew and heads to Judel Industries, conscious that the eternal fire burns underneath its foundations. After sneaking into the Industries, the organization makes their manner to the basement wherein they locate the eternal hearthplace. Following the historic scriptures, they accumulate the specified substances, every symbolizing power, resilience and divinity. Dwarf steps ahead to help them below the warmth of the eternal hearthplace. The hammer is cast. Magna holds the hammer, feeling its weight and electricity. The subsequent day Magna eagerly assessments the newly cast hammer, hoping to experience the entire volume of his powers returning, but whilst he throws it with all his would, possibly the hammer slightly travels some feet earlier than touchdown at the floor. Stressed and frustrated, Magna attempts over and over, however the consequences stay the identical. Every failed try takes away his self-assurance, and in a second of despair he yells at why his powers have not back, but disheartened Magna returns domestic and activates the TV. Simplest to look, Fjord addressing the media. Fjord smugly broadcasts that he has formally taken price of Judel Industries. He dismisses all claims through environmentalists, approximately the enterprise poisoning the surroundings, calling them baseless and politically encouraged to feature to the gods' depression. Fjord reveals his plans to make bigger Judel Industries operations for Magna. It feels just like the defeat of the gods and the triumph of the giants. Later that night time the weather grew excessive, with darkish clouds spreading throughout the sky and heavy winds choosing up. Magna realizes that it smiles a signal from nature, so he grabs his hammer and step outdoors. Searching up, he sees lightning flashing furiously throughout the sky. know how what he want to do. He increases the hammer closer to the heavens. Abruptly a tremendous bolt of lightning struck the hammer, illuminating the environment. The strike regarded to evoke the hammer. Magna additionally feels a surge of power, understanding that his powers is lower back. In the meantime, on the Judd family, FJ is confronting Saksa due to the fact she wants one half of the Judd Commercial Enterprise Corporations for herself. That is why he beats her and confines her inside the residence as punishment. After a while, Magna arrives on the J residence internal. He finds Saksa sitting by myself and wounded. She starts speaking to him and attempts to steer him that collectively they might rule the global. Sax argues that together, along with her capacity to steer human beings and manage narratives mixed with Magna's immense power, they might obtain something, but her real intentions grow to be obvious while she abruptly lunges for Magna's hammer organized for her circulate. Magnus hastily catches her mid-movement and pins her to the floor, preventing her from taking the weapon, but their near proximity result in a romantic second and that they become kissing passionately. After that they have become intimate, but this become all a part of Sax's plan. Her number one intention become to keep Magna distracted, even as Fjord and Ran executed their venture to kill Lorit. In the meantime, at Lit's vicinity, Fjord and Ran confronts him with the purpose to quit his lifestyles, but Loritz fast devises an approach to keep himself. He proposes a deal, claiming he is aware of a manner to kill Magna and will help them in the event that they spare his lifestyles. The two giants pause, intrigued through his provide, and start thinking about whether or not his phrases preserve any price. Then again, Magnus soon realizes that he has left Lorit by myself at domestic and that F and Ran aren't at their domestic too, which increases his suspicions. So he rushes again to his residence handiest to discover Fjord and Ran sitting of their vehicle. Packed with anger, he assumed they had already killed his brother. In a match of rage, Magna hurls his hammer at their automobile, splitting it in, but just then Magna hears Lit's voice. Lorit continues to be alive, even though he's injured. Beaten with comfort, Magna straight away runs to his brother to help him. Some days later, Lorit is visible status through a massive water frame. He's protecting his offspring, the monstrous bug he had nurtured, considering that its removal from his stomach after a heartfelt kiss to the bug, he releases the bug into the water. He has promised the giant to permit the creature develop till it's miles effective, sufficient to kill Magna. In any case, handiest a bug of Asgard should break Thor. Additionally, the giants are searching at him from a distance.